So, I'm a Fallout fan. I know, laugh it up, but it's true. Fallout has always been one of my favorite franchises of all time. The thing is though, we haven't got a new Fallout in over 6 years, and it doesn't seem like we're getting one anytime soon. It also doesn't help that the last game in the series we got was this.
I read on the internet that our games have had a few bugs.
With a post-apocalyptic sized void in my heart, I've started branching out to more games of the same genre. Games like Project Zomboid, Wasteland, and Mad Max have done a serviceable job, but there's always been one series that has intrigued me more than others. A series that seemed to take everything I loved about the genre and expand upon it in its own unique way. So, let's take a look at the quintessential post-apocalyptic Soviet simulator that just so happens to have a new entry that just came out. No, the other one. As much of a sucker as I am for games like Fallout and Metro, I'm kind of ashamed to admit that I've never really delved too deep into Stalker games before. I've dabbled in the original trilogy and played arguably its two biggest mods, Anomaly and Gamma, but the series never really captured me the way I wanted it to. It could have been the dated graphics, unorthodox game design, or the fact that my language is set to Russian and I don't know how to change it back. Despite my naivety to the series, I couldn't have been more excited for Stalker 2. Hopefully this fresh game would ignite a passion for the series. And I mean, come on. This was scratching a radioactive itch I've had in my brains for years. No, it is not a tumor, it's pure passion. So I dropped a pre-order, and after delay and delay, Stalker 2 finally launched this past November. The series has earned quite the reputation for being ultra punishing for new players, but how bad could it be? So, what the hell is Stalker? The best way I can describe Stalker 2 is that it's a mix between Fallout and Tarkov. I know longtime fans of the series are probably cringing at this description, but Stalker 2 does stand out on its own, as a brutal, immersive look into the Chernobyl exclusion zone. It offers a degree of freedom and player choice that you simply don't get in Metro, while also having gunplay that's far superior to Fallout. Sorry, Todd. In Stalker, you're not the hero of the Wasteland, or some type of savior figure. You're just another cog in the machine, trying to survive against a world that's trying to kill you at every moment, and it'll probably succeed. Multiple times. Before we get any further, I think it's only appropriate to look into the backstory of the Stalker series. All of the Stalker games take place in an alternate timeline where a series of lab experiments within the Chernobyl exclusion zone resulted in a second disaster in the year 2006. Some brave scientists did what scientists do, and now we have these anomalies scattered around the zone. These anomalies do not obey the known laws of physics and appear to warp the very fabric of reality around themselves. Anomalies sometimes produce these magical type items called artifacts, which are super valuable, so stalkers like you and me risk our lives searching for these to sell to the highest bidder, which is usually a guy in a wooden shack.
Everything's for sale, my friend. Everything!
As if this wasn't enough, the exclusion zone has also experienced an influx of heavily mutated creatures. In addition to reality warping anomalies and flesh-eating mutants, we also have a bunch of human factions. Each faction has their own way of operating, but the one thing they do share in common is hatred for absolutely everything that isn't them. Some of these factions can be befriended, at the cost of making their enemies your enemies, so choose your friends wisely. The gameplay of Stalker 2 is excellent. The game is a first-person shooter, and all the mechanics around the shooting are tight and responsive. I never felt like I was held back by the controls at all, and most missed shots were nothing more than user error. There's a pretty healthy weapon variety here, with everything from pistols, shotguns, assault rifles, and even sniper rifles. Along with the weapons, there are a multitude of attachments that can be applied to them. Weapon degradation is present here. If you don't keep your guns in tip-top shape, prepare yourself for jams and other malfunctions. These mechanics add another level of strategy. You can only have 3 weapons active at any given time, so you really need to strategize and figure out which ones are suitable for your journey ahead. The quest design is typically pretty simple, but there are a few that throw a wrench in this. It's never really about your objective, but rather your journey there. You're likely to get sidetracked multiple times, as there's so much out in the world to explore. This is due to the absolute masterclass of a map. Clocking in at a whopping 60 square kilometers, there is more than enough zone to keep you occupied for hours upon hours. It isn't one of those huge barren maps either, it's packed full of interesting locations to explore. The most fun this game has to offer is just picking a direction and walking, and usually getting brutally murdered shortly after. Real quick before we go any further, If you're liking the video so far, consider liking and subscribing. It's free and really helps the channel out a lot. I haven't really spoke much on the story of Stalker 2 yet, and while it's not a masterclass in writing or anything, it does do a serviceable job. You play as the most handsome Eastern European man alive, Skiff. You wake up one night to find your apartment destroyed, and the cause is this mysterious artifact. Now homeless, you enter the zone in hopes to make your fortune. From there, the game kind of opens up, and you're free to do pretty much whatever you want. The main questline kind of reminds me of New Vegas, with how all the factions interact with each other, though this game is notably more linear. Despite this, there are quite a few major choices the player has to make throughout the story, and I never truly knew if I was making the right one. The game even has multiple endings depending on your actions. It's my understanding that the series isn't really known for having groundbreaking narratives, and if this is true, Stalker 2 definitely fits the bill. That being said, the story more than does its job, and most players will be pretty content with it. The beauty of Stalker 2 is you just don't get better by collecting new gear or upgrading your weapons, but you actually feel yourself, the player, getting more skilled as you adventure through the harsh, radioactive landscape. Show not tell is a phrase that's been uttered by many pseudo-intellectual game reviewers on YouTube. This game design ideology is seemingly at the foundation of Stalker 2. Instead of using pretty cinematic cutscenes to tell you how dangerous something or someone is, Stalker 2 lets you experience it yourself, through gameplay. Every time you venture forth in the middle of a radioactive acid pit to collect a new artifact, or fall into a dark cave full of blood-sucking monsters, you experience a piece of the zone in a very physical sense. This sensation is both visceral and immersive, in a way that simply cannot be replicated by cutscenes or expository dialogue. Immersion is the name of the game here, and Stalker 2 excels at this. You truly feel like a stalker, hopelessly slinking through the wasteland in search for supplies and anomalies. This is made stronger by the fact that you're always viewing the world through the lens of our main protagonist. This first-person view is rarely broken, which only allows for more immersion. This is environmental storytelling in its purest form, and after experiencing it myself, I can see why there are so many hardcore Stalker fans to this day, despite the previous game being released over 15 years ago. As a Fallout fan, I'm so happy for you guys. So, gameplay is tight and fun, the atmosphere is immersive and unsettling. How are the graphics? I don't need to sell you on how great these graphics are, as the folks at GSC Game World touted this as one of the game's key features pre-release. Thanks to the power of Unreal Engine 5, they were finally able to deliver us the true next-generation post-apocalyptic game we deserved. Well, at least in theory. Instead, what we got were flickering textures, object pop-in, T-posing NPCs, and a whole heap of AI issues. What should have been an immersive experience is immediately ruined every time you see something like this. This isn't even bringing performance into the equation. This game will struggle to run even on the beefiest PCs. I'm pretty sure trying to launch the game on a Series S would result in a Chernobyl-level disaster. Now, to their credit, the devs have been mostly on top of things, releasing patch after patch post-release, but there are some issues that might never be solved. The main one, of course, being... Without a doubt, the most divisive part of Stalker 2 is ALIFE, or the lack thereof. For those unaware, the original Stalker trilogy heavily featured a system known as ALIFE. It's an AI management system that sets out to give the NPCs of the world their own motives and day-to-day activities. Stalkers would wake up, hunt for supplies, fight bandits and opposing factions, all of which is independent of the player. This basically makes it to where the zone feels like a living, breathing world. You could choose a random NPC and follow him for hours, and he'd never do the same thing twice, or feel like an on-rails character. For the time, this was an incredible feature, and I'm only really scratching the surface here. Stalker 2 promised the return of this system with ALIFE 2.0, and it just doesn't work. NPCs are for the most part static, sticking to their shallow programming and never really venturing out. Instead of coming across enemy patrols naturally, patrols are spawned pretty much right on top of you. This here is the biggest downside to Stalker 2. It feels like we were lied to, and even after all the updates we've received, it's nowhere near being in the shape of the OG games. Whether this is due to Unreal Engine or whatever it may be, the lack of ALIFE is a stain on an otherwise great experience. So the game has its fair share of bugs, it's true, but here's the thing. I didn't care. Apart from the changes to ALIFE, I was able to look past every bug I encountered. There's a term in the gaming world called Slavjank. This refers to games developed in Eastern European countries that are known for being incredibly atmospheric as well as buggy games. Examples that come to mind are the first Witcher, Arma, and maybe the poster child for the whole genre, Stalker. These games are ambitious and had nothing but pure passion behind them, despite the limited resources at their disposal. While Stalker 2 is the closest to AAA the series has ever been, this isn't COD or Assassin's Creed. It's pretty clear that the team behind it were and still are incredibly passionate about Stalker, as evident by their post-launch support. There are certain aspects of the game that aren't great, sure, but I think these will be solved in the next year. I haven't even mentioned the fact that the devs had to relocate the whole studio due to, their country being invaded. It's honestly a miracle that Stalker 2 ever came out, let alone in the playable state that it did. It's not perfect, not even close actually, but it is one of the most unique gaming experiences I had in 2024, and I can't wait to go back to the originals and give them a try. I think that's all from me. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.